I like the presentation a lot, and I think it's got some really great ideas in it. And I'm just trying to disentangle in my own mind what you're saying about these alternative collectivities and their differentiation from interpolation. Maybe I've got this wrong, but what you seem to be suggesting was that we can recognize ourselves in these other collectivities. You know, we can identify with the cunnilinguing dolphins and so on and so forth. But and I think that's good because it, as you're suggesting, it pushes us beyond our own boundaries. But isn't there a danger that that just becomes another, hey, you there, you perform this sexual act, or hey, you there, you belong to this kind of family, or and so on and so forth?
No, that is a danger. What I'm hoping that I'm doing, what I'm starting to try to do, is my target's the grand family of man, the one collectivity to which we're all supposed to belong, sort of exclusively, or certainly exclusively in these particular discourses. When you read Epstein or even Rollins. So what I'm hoping is that we can sort of multiply these we's more or less indefinitely. So in a sense they will be interpretative and they will be delimiting insofar as each of those goes. But if you can sort of think your way to multiplying those ad infinitum, this is my hope, this is my grand hope. That you can begin to think of yourself not as a human being, an exclusively human being, but belonging to these multiple cross-species, cross-taxons, collectivities. So that would be the sort of liberatory potential in terms of self-identity that I would hope to be captured. But you're right, there is a danger there that you start locking people into, hey, you, there, X, and you just substitute human one for something else. You engage in commerce or whatever.
I mean, could one way of thinking about it be the way that some queer theorists have thought about it, which is that there are other ways of turning around in response to the call of the law, that you could, you know, the call of the human, hey, the human, that you could do human in some kind of parodic, or I'm not sure if you used the word subversion, but people often throw it around, and I don't like it that much, but, you know, other ways of doing human that aren't in bad faith, perhaps, but remain within the interpolative frame.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, maybe. I'll come and get some things.
Thank you.
So thank you for your presentation as well, but I find it a bit problematic. I find problematic the shift you make from what we call this familial collectivities to suddenly the behavior sexual collectivities you're making, because, well, first of all, speaking on the family of man, it's always really problematic, like I would never use the term man in that way, but you make a radical shift from reproduction, like a reproductive imperative, suddenly to non-heteronormative sexual behaviors in both animal, human and non-human animal context. But the thing is that this evolutionary kinship you are trying to talk about, it has also some kind of historical context. And what I see is a bit decontextualized in the way you're talking about it, in a way that I think that the idea of taxonomy itself and the fact that the metaphor family is being used is because of the time when it sprang, and the special theories we're talking about here, like be it Linnaeus or Darwin or Lamarck, right? And the fact that it's embedded in some specific period, specific streams of thought and individualism, and not only like capitalism as well. So this is a big jump, and I do understand this shift you're trying to make from talking about collectivities to focusing on the self and on the individual. Isn't it a bit depoliticizing the thing you're talking about? Because I understand that the whole project is trying to undermine the category of human, right? But then I see it a little bit as falling into the trap of making it a historical, universal, free-floating signifier. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and address those. In terms of, I'm not really trying to see this as an instead of, well, so to take your taxonomic question, I completely agree, yes. So as I very briefly gestured, the eight classic taxonomic categories are absolutely continuing and historical, and would certainly be very important, as I gestured towards too briefly here, to looking at those and deconstructing those and looking at how they work. And in fact, you can divide, and there are infinite subphylums and superorders and numerous traditional taxonomic categories that attempt to capture, take account of the fact that there aren't just data. But yes, absolutely. So yeah, I completely agree. That's exactly the case. I didn't really mean to suggest that we should move away from that and sort of embrace either non-reproductive categories instead, or that we should embrace just the individual instead. In a way, I sort of want to have my cake and eat it. I want to start from the individual, as Nietzsche is recommending, in order to get away from these sort of homogenizing single identity politics, I suppose. Each of us as an individual does belong to numerous different collectivities. And I'm hoping this would be a way of attempting to start to think about the heterogeneous, different collectivities to which each person in this room belongs. And we would each come up with a different set of collectivities. So I only want the individuals as a starting point in the sense that I want the individuals as a starting point and not the great family of man. I don't want to start from the great family of man and sort of stop there as Steinkamp effectively does, or as Epstein does. So the individual is only a starting point. And in a way, it's the collectivities that I'm more interested in, and the more of them, the better. I don't know if I hope that goes some way to address it.
Yeah, so thank you for the clarification. And because especially when we're talking about the behavioral collectivities and the non-human sexualities, I have this danger with both in Bagnall and Ravgarden that you can still treat animals as tokens for human politics, you know?
Sure. I would actually not want to do that. I only picked on the sex in order to set off the sort of heteronormative stuff in Steinkamp. I could have picked lots of other really cool and interesting
I was just wondering whether you find Deleuze useful at all, because he criticizes the human identity and argues that we should find the pack mode, the collective mode, and there are various types of, infinite types of collective modes that we should perhaps try and utilize in understanding who we are. And I was wondering how that fits into your approach.
This feels like coming around. I asked Erica this morning about whether she thought about Foucault, put her on the spot. Not even talk about Foucault.
Oh, sorry.
I'm getting my own consultancy time. So I don't know that that's as well as I should. I suppose it's my compact answer to that. Maybe I really should have his work more from this. When I read Deleuze, I wasn't thinking in these terms at all. So maybe his notions of multiplicities and so on would be an interesting and useful way.
Yeah, that may be useful. You can do the same thing to me tomorrow.
Thank you. This is really a question for you, but also for the community at large here. Of course, I'm also interested in undermining the notion of the human, and I really liked how you were framing it in terms of the bad faith of humanism. But in terms of this being an academic conference, it makes me think of the humanities as kind of the base of the university, and it makes me think of what is the bad faith of the humanities, and what then happens to the university. What are some ways we could do we rethink it as the collectivities or the planetarities, or how does the university continue to function when if we succeed in undermining the human, the humanities upon which it rests? So I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts on this throughout the weekend.
I've got an answer, but I'm more than happy to throw it open. It's a nice question. I suppose my first thought would be that part of what I'm hoping the paper is doing is not just deconstructing the human, but the humanities as well. I mean, the humanist scholars don't engage enough with the scientific literature, I think. And you have to do it very carefully. You have to not be reductive about it. But there's some fascinating stuff out there that just doesn't get into a lot of the discussions of the sort that I was gesturing towards. So, I think deconstructing or complicating or reconfiguring the distinction between the humanities and the sciences would be a sort of corollary of this project of self-identification that I'm looking at, I think.
I'm not sure. Okay, I've got other questions. I mean, one was about sort of scale in these collectivities. So would you go down to the sort of atomic level and say we who are made of atoms and stuff like that? I mean, because that sort of really does include not just everyone, but everything. But my other question is about what I love about becoming where we are is that there's also a sense of determinism about it, that one aspect of it is that we become what we have to become. So I guess I'm wondering about how would you negotiate this sort of openness of new collectivities and new possibilities of identifying ourselves with a sense of the restriction or the determinism that we have to become what we will become anyway.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I agree with you about the atomic stuff. I did think a little bit about that, but I just don't have the background and the expertise to address that yet. But I hope I can move down to molecular and wherever else it takes me. Yeah, in terms of determinism, that's a great question. There is a slightly deterministic feel to Nietzsche's work, and I sort of part of me quite likes that. But again, Nietzsche tries to have his cake and eat it, and he wants to emphasise this creative aspect of becoming what you are. So he's very much opposed, as I said, to this notion of knowing thyself, as if there's some kind of little essential you deep in there, and you just have to look hard enough to find it. So he would be absolutely opposed to any kind of determinism of that sort, where there's an essential you waiting to come out. And I think what I particularly like about Nietzsche's notion of becoming what you are is this idea of working with the materials that you've got. You can't become anything you like. I mean, you just can't. Nietzsche notoriously was set by all sorts of physical elements and character traits and disposition. And Nietzsche was never going to go off and become certain things. He was not, yeah. So I think for me, thinking through this notion of becoming what you are is a way of trying to negotiate exactly that, the sort of deterministic, or maybe determinism is too strong, but the sort of directed aspect of this notion of self-realisation and working within the creativity that you still have within that. So you can still forge yourself with the materials you've got. It's not determined what you're going to come out with, even if you're working with a limited tool set or set of materials. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what appeals to me about this sort of approach anyway. And to open it up to the collectivity question, it would be a matter of embracing those collectivities to which you can see yourself as becoming a part of or having affinity with.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to stop there. I hope you'll all join us for what we have in store for this evening, which we're going to begin with a somber march through the city. And then we're going to have some food, a lot of cut, and then we're going to plan is to go to a social club where there's some live music and just a chance to meet more people. Tomorrow we're going to start at 9:30 in the morning.